Why has DW News started to criticize Mr. Zelensky? What's the reason? Yes, we are observing certain strange phenomena in the geopolitical sphere, in the journalistic sphere, media. Uh, the Western controlled media is kind of criticizing Mr. Zelensky. I have not seen this DW News thing, but like you're saying, it must have happened. But what I can show you is this. We all know Amnesty International, which is controlled by the West, which means it is controlled by the US. They are always critical of India. If you see their Twitter, let me show you an interesting tweet from Amnesty International, which came 3 days ago, August 4th. They said this: Ukrainian forces have put civilians in harm's way by establishing bases and operating weapon systems in populated residential areas. Such tactics violate international humanitarian law and endanger civilians as they turn civilian objects into military targets. Now, in case you have seen my previous episodes from when the Russia-Ukraine war started, I said precisely the same things. I said that the Ukrainians are using these horrible tactics of putting the weapon systems, etc., in civilian areas. And when the Russians are forced to retaliate, it will cause civilian casualties. It will make the Russians look bad. But the Ukrainians are putting their civilians on the line as cannon fodder. I said that this thing in February, in March, and I got a lot of criticism for that. Lots of Western commentators, I saw the comments. They're still there on my channel. The comments that they have put. Now Amnesty International is corroborating what I had said at that time. Right? Now, so what's happening? Amnesty International is essentially an agent of the West, of the Western powers, which means the US. They are used time and again to criticize the Indian government, to make India look bad, to claim that India has human rights abuses, and God knows what else. All lies. So how come they have suddenly turned against Mr. Zelensky and the Ukraine regime? What's happening? And like Mr. Alpha Beta says, or who he or she is, yeah, I don't know the gender. So apparently DW News also is criticizing Mr. Ukraine, Mr. Zelensky, and maybe some other things may also be up there in the media I haven't seen yet. Yeah, this is an interesting turn of events. Is the tide turning for Mr. Zelensky? Is he no longer of much use to the West? Has he served his purpose? If things continue like this, you may soon in the forthcoming days see stories of Mr. Zelensky's $500 million in some bank account in the West or something like that. And then all they have to do is put all the blame on him, that he mismanaged the situation and that's why Ukraine is not doing well. That's why Ukraine is losing. Blame it all on him and then move on. So you see, it's like this. Whether it was Mr. Saddam Hussein, whether it was anybody else, the West uses these despotic people, these little puppet-like people. Saddam Hussein actually was a Iraqi nationalist. He tried to take his country in a certain direction. He was not a puppet. But yes, he was certainly an agent of the US for a long time. The Americans used Saddam Hussein as a stick to beat Iran with. And then when he served his purpose, they threw him to the wolves. We know what they did to him. The Americans have this long history. If you study the history of the 20th century in Africa, in other places, they have this history of doing this again and again and again, propping somebody up as long as they serve a certain purpose. And then once the purpose is served, you throw that person to the wolves. So it looks like Mr. Zelensky is kind of in trouble. If Amnesty International criticizes him openly and doesn't delete the tweet is there for 3 days, it sends a certain signal. It looks like Mr. Zelensky's days as a world leader are numbered. Yeah. So I don't know what's going on. Maybe the Americans are now, they want to focus more on the Taiwan thing. Yeah. The Ukraine-Russia thing is old news now. That people are tired. These wars are distractions for the American public to keep the public engaged on things that are apparently very important. There is a recession. There is a terrible recession happening in the US right now. The US government has changed the definition of recession in order to claim there is no recession. The definition of recession, ask any economist, is 2 or more quarters of negative GDP growth. What's a quarter? 3 months. There are 4 quarters in a year. The first 3 months, the next 3 months, the next 3 months, the next 3 months. The definition of a recession in economics is 2 consecutive quarters of negative economic growth, of GDP getting smaller. And that's what's happening in the US. The US is in a recession. The fuel prices are extraordinarily high right now. Just see what the prices of gasoline, of fuel, were during Donald Trump's time, and see what the prices are right now during the presidency of Joe Biden. Look at the approval ratings of Joe Biden, the lowest in all US history. Yeah, lower than Jimmy Carter. So there are problems internally. Yeah. Now, Ukraine was a nice diversion for the American public. We are doing something righteous. We are supporting the righteous side. We are supporting Zelenskyy, this great freedom fighter. Now, people may be getting tired of it. So let's start something new in Taiwan. We sent Pelosi there to stir up the flames. And now let's focus on Taiwan. I'm just speculating. I don't know what the decision making and thought process is in the State Department, in the US government, etc. But this is what it looks like. So maybe now the tide may turn for Mr. Zelenskyy. Now the Western media is allowed to criticize him rightly for what he is doing, and it's not he who's doing that. He is just the face, the public face of the Ukrainian government, right? He doesn't really have any power. He's just an actor who's acting as president. He and his wife, they had this recent photo shoot on the front page of Vogue, as you may have seen. So that's what's going on. So the tide seems to be turning for Mr. Zelenskyy. It looks like he may no longer be of a great deal of use for the puppet masters who are running Ukraine, and some changes may occur soon, possibly. Yeah.